And this is Fantasy Grounds Academy, going to go over some basic tips on the user interface within Fantasy Grounds Unity, the virtual tabletop platform. What we're going to do is talk about the drag and drop that is available in this specific platform. One of the most valuable and interesting and misunderstood things, I believe, within the interface is the actual drag and drop functionality. The drag and drop functionality is an important piece of using Fantasy Grounds, and hopefully we can help demystify some of it and make it a little bit clearer. So why are we doing this? Well, we're trying to make basically a difficult or potentially misunderstood subject clearer and easier to understand. So this video will attempt to demystify the Fantasy Grounds Unity user interface one step at a time. So we're not going to cover every little thing, but we're going to talk about the pins or the shortcuts and the drag and drop functionality. So first and foremost, I want you to meet a couple people that are going to help us with this lesson. So this is drag and drop. So basically they are two siblings that are basically coming together and trying to figure this thing out. They're just two users like us, two concepts, one goal, and oh yeah, forget the dragon or the dragon. Anyway, so the whole thing is to get people used to the interface and what it can do, and maybe even some of its limitations. So what we're going to do is talk about drag and drop. So the drag part is basically any time that you can drag a link, which is normally in the upper left-hand corner. So drag and drop is a very common feature in Fantasy Grounds Unity. It's basically when you grab an object, such as this particular upper left-hand corner. So instead of object, I'd probably say shortcut, and you drag it to a different location or onto a different data type. For instance, this person here, or this icon, or this animated figure here, this is Mr. Drag or Mrs. Drag. So I'm going to take this link on the top left corner of this basic window here, and you notice I have them unlocked. So it's important that you unlock some of the data types because you won't be able to drag and drop. So that's something I'll point out shortly. But I'm going to left click and drag and drop right on the image. This is like if it was a map or something or anything really, it will create this link. So if I accidentally close this drag story entry and I open that back up, there you go. That's basically a shortcut. I'm going to do and repeat the same thing. So I'm going to take drop and drag and drop it onto the actual character. So let's drag and drop this on there. And there we go. So there is drag and drop. Those are our two friendly helpers here. So drag is the one that's going to left click, hold down the single left click mouse button and hold it, and then physically drag the mouse across and drop any data type you need and release it. And that's basically what you're doing for drag and drop. So some of the things that happen is, you might have sensitivity issues in your fingers, or your mouse might be acting up or whatever. So there's that problem, but then there's also just having the manual dexterity to do that. So when you're dragging and dropping, you want to grab the pin or the shortcut, which is this little icon in the top left corner of any data window. So if you open up pretty much anything in Fantasy Grounds, so like these images, for instance, these are links, or in this case, they could be called pins, or these look like little buckler shields. In other rule sets and themes, they'll look different. But nonetheless, those are pins or shortcuts. Any of those things are manipulable, and you can basically take them and drag them into the hotkeys below. So I've already done that below here. I have sibling 1 is drag, and sibling number 2 is drop. So I take this pin on the top left, drag and drop it into one of the shortcuts. So I have it in shortcut number 7, and then I have drop in shortcut number 9. Now, if you close these or you exit Fantasy Grounds, you basically won't have any of this content up. It'll be blank like this. So when you come back, You just click on your shortcut that you made, and that will put it right back where you left it, and then you drag and drop this. Now that I also have these shortcuts on the drag side of this, these shortcuts, I can just single click on them and it will bring up graphics that I'm going to use for this particular show, which would translate into, like if you're running a game, if you had story entries or any kind of images, that's how that works. So drag and drop is a big concept in Fantasy Grounds, and you would not believe how many people have problems with it. So if you remember that you can drag and drop things, that helps a lot. So the next part of this is a basic tip that I'm going to get into, which is important. So you learn how and where to drag and drop. So if you're dragging data types to each other, such as these two windows, or if you're going to drag this particular graphic to this particular area, this window here has to be unlocked. Whereas the maps do not require you to unlock them just to drag and drop things on them. So there's a difference there. So maps and images, you do not have to unlock them to drag images or links on top of these. So if you're trying to drag a shortcut link, you don't really need to do that. So for instance, if I'm going to drag over the drag part, I'll drop it right here on this pin, or the picture of a pin, and then the drag one, I'll do the same thing. And the reason these two look different is because they're from different rule sets. So these technically would be different shields, but I wanted to show that they can also look different, but they have the same function. So when you're dragging and dropping, it's usually the left or the top left corner, and you just grab it and you drag and drop to your next set of data, whatever that might be. So in this case, these are story entries, so they allow me to drop them like that. And they allow me to release, and it will populate. Now, there is a little bit of misnomer here about how easy or how these actually fall onto the page, and we'll cover that shortly. So you have to learn how to drag and drop when and where. And on character sheets, or when you're building characters, there is a lot of drag and drop availability on character sheets. You don't normally have to unlock those to drag anything onto them. So data types that are maps and images or character sheets, you don't have to unlock anything. But when you're doing data types for like story entries and tables and those sort of things, you have to unlock these story entries in order to drag and drop them. Or you have to open them up so you can drop things in there. If you lock it, or it is locked, or you can't unlock it, when you try to drag this in, it's not going to do anything. So make sure that these are open when you drag items to these particular windows. So in this case, if I wanted to drag the basic tip over, I want to make sure that this area is free and that I can drag them. And I've already done that here. As you can see, I put in these two links already. I've already added those. So those are already dragged in here. So that's something that was already done. There are some cases when dragging data types to other data types, which is, like I explained, tables and story entries and parcels and those sort of things, you'll need to unlock before you drag and drop. So that's what this is pointing out. And then this graphic here is kind of showing you, like, here's the graphic that's the image, or in this case, this would be the window. And you're going to left click and hold the mouse button down and just drag and drop it onto the next window or page that you're trying to attach it to. So you're basically linking things together, and that's one of the big features of Fantasy Grounds, is the ability to link everything together. It's a huge misunderstood and misused, I think, actual usage thing for the interfaces. You got to be able to understand how this works. So shortcuts, or pins sometimes they're called, are located typically on the top left corner of any given data type. So that is story entries, images, maps, tables, those sort of things. Examples of a standard shortcut icon is like this little shield looking thing. These will differ depending on the rule set or the theme, so it really depends on what you have loaded and which themes you have activated. Sometimes it'll be a dragon, a skull, or in this case, it's an icon of a dragon. So there's all kinds of different shortcut PNG files or like little assets that are different, but they do the same thing. So drag plus drop, and that's what you're doing, is basically bringing these together and joining with the link. That's basically the bottom line with that. So if you've ever used Fantasy Grounds and you had some trouble with it, it could just be that you haven't practiced, or that maybe you're having trouble with your hands. Sometimes it's a visual thing where you can't really see where you're doing it. So that there are things that can get in the way of that. But just remember, this drag and drop method is basically the way that Fantasy Grounds is set to work. So you're basically linking things together, making shortcuts, or linking things on top so that you have easier and quicker access. So that's like what I've done with these two pins. So let's go to the next graphic, the drop details. So you're going to drag here next to the cursor exactly. So when you are dragging a link or a shortcut to any given area within a text field, so this is a story entry. If I want to drag this onto this image, I don't have to worry about this because this is pretty simple, and I just have to drag and drop that. So if I wanted to drag this drag section here, all I have to do is drag it and drop it right there. That's not that hard to do. But when you want to drag it to a certain point or a certain area, for instance, if I want to drag this particular entry into the story entry, first I want to make sure it's unlocked, if you can. And then secondly, when you do drop it, you want to give yourself a little bit of room. So in other words, you might want to drag the window open a little bit and leave a little space for yourself, especially if it's down here at the bottom. If you put your cursor at the end of the sentence here, that will give you your placement. And then what you're going to do is single left click, hold down the mouse button, the left mouse button, and drag it right on this kind of a diagonally from there, and that will put it right under where you want it. If you drag it any old way, like say you just go like this, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get this. You're going to get this blank link here, and that was not truly the link that you're getting. That's just an entry. So there's a couple ways to handle this. Since it already has the text here, you could simply redrag the link and put it back in that section. So that's sibling one. So I want to take this link and drag and drop it onto that circle, which is the link, and that will fix it. If you don't like that, or that's not what you're intending to do, I'm going to hit Control Z and start over. And what I want to do is show you that you can hit enter, but if you hit enter at this point, it's going to make another link shortcut. And the reason why is because it's carrying over the data type or the formatting from the previous line or sentence. So if you want to start over and you don't want to have a link there, you use Control 1, and that turns it into regular text. Then if you want to drag something there, you would just left click, hold the mouse button down, and drop it right next to that cursor, and it will go where you want it. So if you want to insert something in between links, and you've already done a bunch of it, you don't want to redo them, you would simply put your cursor at the end of the sentence, hit enter. You'll notice that there's a link here. Now you can drag the cursor or the shortcut to that link there, and that'll work too. So that's not a problem. It's just you got to realize what it's doing. Now, if I do it again and I hit enter, but let's say, hey, I don't want a link and I don't want to drag anything there. You hit Control 1 and then maybe enter, and now you have some space there, and you can type or change to whatever formatting you want. So that's something that you need to get used to as to where you can drop things. So if you see or get this type of thing, it's probably that you have dragged it or dragged it on to the wrong place. So these are examples of some of the problems that you might come across when you're trying to drag and drop the links. So just wanted to let you know, you can either set your cursor at the end of the sentence and place the dragged icon or token right after that, and it will put it in this place. But see, it created this extra line because I had that line selected, and it tried to put it in between. So let me hit Control Z again, and that's a failed drag basically. So that's not what you necessarily wanted to do. Easy to fix. You just redrag this back in there, and it'll repopulate it. But if you don't want a link there, you're going to hit Control 1, and it'll change it to normal text type. So if I hit Enter, you'll see the link. You'll hit Control 1, which is a shortcut, and that gets rid of the formatting, and it goes back to a standard body text, which is your basic text editing. So that's something that you're going to have to get used to, and it's not always cut and dry. You might have a bunch of things grouped together, and it's kind of hard to see where you're going to drag these things. So I'm going to open up a drag accuracy thing, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So zooming in on this, there is the shortcut here. There is the text, and you see I have this dividing line. So you want to put that cursor right about here, which is slightly below and to the right of your cursor. And that's on the first line here, or whatever line you're trying to put it. So if I drag this over and drop it right about diagonal, it won't do that because I'm trying to insert it between two links. So let me go back there. So this doesn't work very well if you're trying to put it in the center. The better way to do it would be to hit Enter and then drag the link over and populate it, and that would insert it in the middle. Now, if you just want to continue and not do that and go to another line, just go to the entry and drag and drop it where the cursor's at the end of this sentence. And see, I didn't drag it properly. I had it too low that time. So I need to bring it up a little. So it didn't do it right. So that's a failed drag there. So I'm going to hit Control Z, and you'll notice this when you're using Fantasy Grounds. It can get a little frustrating. So the next thing is to try to drag it to the right place. So if I do it like that, you see I had it too high that time. So this was where a lot of people get frustrated with it, and they don't quite understand how it works. So if you look at this graphic, it shows you you're going to drag and drop right on this area here, which is a little bit to the right of this number 2 and the parenthesis and the cursor. So let's do that again. So I'm going to take this, drag and drop it. There it goes. So basically, where this hand is where I dropped the link. Now that I have it down here, you can see the cursor is after it. I can repeat that process, or if I hit Enter, it's going to make another link. And if you don't want that link, you just hit Control 1, and that reformats the line that you're on. If you hit Control Z, it will take you back to where you were, but it doesn't change the formatting. So in order to change the formatting, you need to either hit Enter and Control 1, or leave yourself some space and give yourself some room to drag and drop. But you want to follow where the cursor is. So if your cursor's up here on the story entry here, all the way over here on the left, and I try to drag one of these on there, it's going to give me that. So you got to be careful where your cursor is too. So this is kind of what I'm putting on here is your drag and drop accuracy will help with your sanity. So this shortcut here is this kind of showing you that, okay, here's line 2, and this is the cursor that would be here on the bottom left, and then you will drag a link there. And this one's not as sensitive, but you still have to put it next to the cursor. There we go. So that is something that you will struggle with until you get used to where you can drop it. And this graphic is showing you that. So if you want to drag with more accuracy, that will help you. Or at least have an understanding that you can hit Control Z or Control 1, depending on the situation. So if you want to undo it, Control Z. If you want to change the data type, so if I highlight this information here, and hit delete, and I still have that little circle here, this link, I'm going to hit Control 1, and that's going to change this line to regular text. So there's a couple ways you can kind of get out of it. But if you're just trying to make links one after another and you're doing it in order, just make sure that you accurately drag it onto this bottom right corner where the actual cursor is. So if my cursor's up here next to 2, I'll take this data type and I will drag and drop it right behind, kind of diagonally. So you would look at it as a rose compass, that is southeast. So here, I did it a little too far away. I was kind of over here. So I hit Control Z. So I want to make sure that I drag this over accurately. And see, it did it again. So it is very touchy, this part. If you're trying to do it like this, it is very touchy. The other way you can do this is if you just make all your links first, and then just drag and drop all the data. So if you want to just do that, that's easier. So if you have more than one, you just take each one and individually drag them into the data type that you want. So that makes it easier. And then you're also on a new line that's not a link. So there's a couple different ways to approach this, and I think this final way I've showed you is a lot easier. So if you're creating content or you're needing these shortcuts on your story entries, it's better to make the data type and then drag over the link and not have to go through all that rigmarole of re-dragging and stuff. So again, if I try to drag this over, it's not going to give me the right thing because the cursor's down here. So if I want to make that work, I need to stick it next to the cursor. So that's the thing, is you got to know where your cursor's at in order to make this work. There we go. So that's kind of what this graphic shows, is that you kind of have like a drop zone. So if you're going to drag and drop it at the after the sentence here, you kind of have like a little drop zone. If you go too high or too far to the right or too far to the left, it's going to give you the broken link that you have to redrag to. So just keep that in mind when you're dragging and dropping, that is what's happening. And also don't forget to unlock your story entries or whatever data type you're dragging into this area, because it won't do anything. And I don't know how many times I've done that where I've taken and tried to drag something over and crap, forgot to unlock it. So leave it unlocked until you're done. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Just remember that you can link things together. So if, for instance, I wanted these graphics all linked together, I could do that. So let me start with this graphic first. So here's the first graphic. I'm going to bring up the second graphic, which was the basic tips. Now, if I wanted to make this easier on myself, I could take this basic tip and link it to this particular graphic. And now for the basic tip for the next graphic, which is the drop details, I could link that there. And then when I bring that up, that brings up the drop details. And for the drop details, I am going to link the drop accuracy. So that's basically an easy way to make this data work for you and easier to get to. So now instead of clicking over here on this list or down in the shortcuts, it's right from within the image. So if I click that, and then I click that, and then I click that. So that's another way to link things together to make it a lot easier. Or you could make this little run list over here like I've done to kind of speed things up. So that's just the things that I'm covering today for drag and drop. So remember this corny little graphic here of the two siblings drag and drop. So we have I don't know if they're brother and sister or what, but they're related, and they tend to, they tend to have problems. So if you can remember this stupid graphic, drag and drop here, they are your friends. So learn how to drag and drop with accuracy. Learn when and where you can do it and how. So if you have problems with your fingertips, like you lost some tactile sense, or if you have an old mouse that's not behaving, or if you're trying to use a trackpad, you're going to have problems with dragging and dropping. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that, but I want you to understand what's going on so that you will be able to use the interface, or at least get an understanding of what's going on. So dragging and dropping is a fundamental practice in Fantasy Grounds. I know it may sound stupid, like, oh, I know what I'm doing there. All I have to do is drag it. Well, that's true. It is pretty simple. But you would be surprised how many people get it wrong or have problems and they fight it. So that's kind of why I've gone over this, because I think it's a very fundamental practice and thing that you do with Fantasy Grounds, regardless of the rule set. It can be any rule set, and anything that makes this tougher. I want to try to help you, or at least give you an idea of what's going on. And this little dragon here is representative of misunderstandings and impatience and that sort of thing. So 2 siblings, 2 users, 2 concepts, 1 goal. And that's to figure out how to drag and drop and to make it easier on you, or more understood on how the formatting works and where the cursor is and unlocking these windows. So it's very important for that. So this dragon has been squashed for the day. I think hopefully that'll give you guys enough information to chew on and to practice. So just practice dragging links over. So you want to drag them over and make sure you got it in the proper drop zone. And see, I had it too low that time. So this method of doing it is a lot harder. So unless you're really practiced at it, I'd recommend doing some practice runs before you do that. See, it's really, really annoying. So it can make life hard on you if you are not used to the interface. So all I'm saying is practice and understand what's going on. So here, I dropped it underneath. It's a lot easier. But when you're underneath it, it has to be regular data type, which was Control 1. So if I hit Control 1, that's going to take the link out. It'll leave the text. So that's just a quick tip. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. We're talking about drag and drop, and that should be something. Hey, what's going on, Sedain? So that is something that a lot of people have problems with in Fantasy Grounds, and it's just a matter of practice, manual dexterity, and things that you need to understand about the interface. So take care, everyone. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you.